You may begin.
Shalom and welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here to come and worship with us and to dig deeper into Yahweh's truth in the ancient text. And he's always faithful to give a new song to Scripture, and today was the same. So we're in Psalm 82 and Psalm 43 in the Septuagint. I'd like a couple of you to read that just to bring context to the couple verses that I picked out that we're going to declare so that you know this. And I would encourage you to, even on your own time, just go and meditate on these Psalms just to understand what it is. So when you have this catchy tune in your head and you're singing this, you understand what you're singing in the fullness of it, even though I've picked that one verse out of each one. So Charles, could you do Psalm 82 in the Septuagint?
Yes, here's Psalm 82, a song of psalm for Asaph. O God, who shall be compared to thee? Be not silent, neither be still, O God. For behold, thine enemies have made a noise, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. Against thy people they have craftily imagined a device, and have taken counsel against thy saints. They have said, Come, and let us utterly destroy them out of a nation, and let the name of Israel be remembered no more at all. For they have taken counsel together with one consent. They have made a confederacy against thee. Even the tents of the Emudims and the Ishmaelites, Moab and the Arganenes, Gebal and Ammon and Amalek, and the Philistines also, with them that dwell at Tyre. Yea, Assyr too is come with them. They have become a help to the children of Lot. Do thou to them as Madiam, and to Sisera, as to Jabin at the brook of Kishon. They were utterly destroyed at Ador. They became a dung for the earth. Make their princes as Oreb and Zeb, Zebi and Salmana, even all their princes, who said, Let us take to ourselves the altar of God as an inheritance. O my God, make them as a wheel, a stubble before the face of the wind, as fire which shall burn up a wood, as the flame may consume the mountains. So shalt thou persecute them with thy tempest, and trouble them in thy anger. Fill their faces with dishonor, so shall they seek thy name, O Lord. Let them be ashamed and troubled for evermore. Yea, let them be confounded and destroyed, and let them know that the name is the Lord, and thou alone art most high over all the earth.
Yeah. Okay, and so if you're in a different Bible other than the Septuagint, it would be Psalm 83 that Charles just read, and then this is Psalm 44 in your regular Bibles, otherwise Psalm 43. Go ahead, Michelle.
O Elohim, we have heard with our eyes, our fathers have told us, the work which thou wroughtest in their days. In the days of old thine hand utterly destroyed the heathen, and thou didst plant them, thou didst afflict the nations, and cast them out. For they inherited not the land by their own sword, and their own arm did not deliver them, but thy right hand, and thine arm, and thy light of thy countenance, because thou wert well pleased in them. Thou art indeed my King and my Elohim, who commandest deliverance for Jacob. In thee will we push down our enemies, and in thy name will we bring to naught them that riseth against us. Amen. For I will not trust in my bow, and in my sword shall not save me. For thou hast saved us from them that afflicted us, and hast put to shame them that hated us. In Yahuwah I will make our boast all the day, and to thy name will we give thanks forever. Pause. But now thou hast cast off and put us to shame, and thou wilt not go forth with our host. Thou hast turned us back before our enemies, and they that hated us spoiled for themselves. Thou madest us as sheep for meat, and thou scattered us amongst the nations. Thou hast sold thy people without price, and there was no profit by their exchange. Sorry, one sec. I have to turn the page. Thou hast made us a reproach to our neighbors, a scorn and a derision to them that are around about us. Thou hast made us a proverb among the Gentiles, and shaking of the head among the nations. All the day my shame is before me, and the confusion of my face has covered me, because of the voice of the slanderer and reviler, because of the enemy and the avenger. All these things are come upon us, but we have not forgotten thee, neither have we dealt unrighteously in thy covenant, and our heart has not gone back, but thou hast turned aside our past from thy way, for thou hast laid us low in a place of affliction, and the shadow of death has covered us. If we have forgotten the name of our Elohim, if we have spread out our hands to the strange God, shall not Elohim search these things out? For he knows the secrets of the heart. For thy sake we are killed all day long, and we are counted as sheep for the slaughter. Keep reading.
Is that the end?
I
I think that's the end.
think it is.
Yeah. So like I say, these are two very loaded psalms. And we're going to worship. So once you get the hang of this song, start joining in. And Levi, if you want to go and sit next to Daniel a little closer, and Charles, you want to squeeze into his mic, you guys can do some stuff and add a little bit more to the songs. One more time. One more time. Here we go, and let them know that your name is Yahweh. And let them know that your name is Yahweh. And let them know that your name is Yahweh. You guys got it? And let them know that your name is Yahweh. These are our enemies. Let them know. And let them know that your name is Yahweh. And let them know that your name is Yahweh. You alone are most high over all the earth. Know that your name is Yahweh. You alone are most high over all the earth. Know that your name is Yahweh. Got it? So someone's going to help me with that little other counter melody, but you guys have to get that one strong for me, okay? And let them know that your name is Yahweh. You alone are most high over all the earth. Know that your name is Yahweh. You alone are most high over all the earth. Know that your name is Yahweh. You alone are most high over all the earth. Know that your name is Yahweh. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high. You alone are most high. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most Out. knows the secret of the heart. Let them know that your name is Yahweh. You alone are most high over all the earth. That your name is Yahweh. You alone are most high over all the earth. That your name is Yahweh. You alone are most high over all the earth. You alone are most high over all the earth.
Thanks.
And we'll just be worshiping you now and forever. Thank you, Abba. Thank you that you're in the midst of us as we just declare and worship you and put you first in our lives. Declaring your promises, going deeper in your truth today. Continue to just bless us with your spirit. Open our hearts, open our spiritual eyes to see your truth, your ways, and just to give us hunger, a spiritual hunger, to want to know you more and to walk in your path as you lead us and to be obedient to what you've called us to do. We love you so much. And everybody said?
Amen. Thank you, Davene, for leading us in worship, and thanks to everyone who made it out here tonight. I would have sung an introduction, but I didn't want to make angels cry, so I decided not to sing. So, picking up where we left off, we are in Genesis chapter 22, and tonight's study is titled The Measure of a Man. And a couple of things you'll notice off the bat. We made a name change to the study, so it's no longer TeamD Bible study. We replaced Bible with Scripture, seeing that we reference other sources in order to build on our understanding
Other Scripture
of what the narrative of the Scriptures is all about. So everything has changed, but the website remains the same, teamdbiblestudy.com. So, the measure of a man, Genesis chapter 22. So, in the news, very interesting stuff.
At the point of putting this study together, beginning in August, there were two newsworthy situations occurring in the Middle East and around the world. It was coincidental that both situations are loosely connected to the study. The first, which received wide coverage, was about Festival of the Sacrifice. Eid Kurban, Eid al-Adha.
Eid Kurban, Eid al-Adha.
Okay.
Right, so
You
Kurban.
practiced.
Yeah,
You practiced.
Kurban should be a word familiar to us. It's a borrowed word.
As mentioned, this festival is about sacrifice. And in one of the articles that was trending, it talks about about Palestinians not being able to afford the animal for the sacrifice. Gazans too poor to afford sheep for a Eid sacrifice under blockade. Israel cash row. By readers via the Jordan Times, August 8, 2019. Last updated August 8, 2019. Gaza. Ali usually marks the Muslim holiday at... Do you want to say that?
Eid al-Adha.
With his family in the Gaza Strip by sacrificing a sheep, a customary annual ritual for those who can spare the cost. But this year, the 49-year-old police officer says he cannot afford to buy an animal for the Feast of the Sacrifice holiday, which begins next week after the Palestinian Authority halved his salary 5 months ago. I have slaughtered sheep every year, but this year there is no way I can. I am ashamed, said the father of 5 who declined to give his last name. Another article instead focused on the lighter side of things.
Eid al-Adha celebrations around the world. This is from BBC, 12th August 2019.
Each year, Muslims gather for the occasion that commemorates the Prophet Ibrahim's willingness to sacrifice his son on the command of God. Ibrahim was eventually given a lamb to sacrifice instead. Each article failed to mention who was the one being sacrificed by Abraham, as in the case of other articles which explicitly stated Ishmael, a topic for another day, but interesting that this observance trended by the media. Happening around the same time, but not widely broadcasted, was a test run of the red heifer sacrifice as reported by Breaking Israel News. Exclusive burning of heifer takes place in preparation for Third Temple.
This is by Adam Eliyahu Bokowitz, dated August 15, 2019.
A major step was made towards reinstating the temple service. After an intensive study into the practical details, an actual heifer, albeit not a red one, was burned in precisely the manner that will enable the Jewish people to be purified. The most enigmatic commandment, chapter 19 of the book of Numbers, gives an in-depth description of the mitzvah Torah commandment of the burning of the red heifer and subsequent mixing with water for the purpose of sprinkling on the Jews as a means of ritual purification from contact with a dead body. Despite the biblical description, the mitzvah of the red heifer is considered the most enigmatic of all the biblical commandments. The red heifer is essential to the restoration of the temple service. The return of the mitzvah of the red heifer is described by the prophet Ezekiel as a stage in the final redemption. There are a few takeaways from each article. The sacrifice of animals is actively practiced, each sacrifice for a different reason, both likely dedicated to the Elohim of Abraham. Whichever way it cuts, both are an abomination to Yahweh, as he states via his prophet Isaiah.
So this is from Isaiah chapter 66, verse 1 to 3, and it's read from the Septuagint. Thus saith Yahuwah, Heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. What kind of a house will ye build for me? And of what kind is it to be the place of my rest? For all these things are mine, saith Yahuwah, and to whom will I have respect? But to the humble and meek, and the man that trembles at my words? But the transgressor that sacrifices a calf to me is as he that kills a dog, and he that offers fine flour as one that offers swine's blood. He that gives frankincense for a memorial is as a blasphemer. Yet they have chosen their own ways, and their souls has delighted in their abominations. And as we have discussed before, we know that the Anointed One is acting in a specific role, and it was previously discussed in other Bible studies. But it's just to draw a reference that no matter how much sacrifice you sacrifice or want to replace who was sacrificed or allegedly sacrificed, it's null and void. So let's get into the Bible study. But before we do, just the reminders that we have, what this study is all about. And it's something that we will keep reinforcing each week, because we want everybody to dig these things out for themselves and not just take our words for it, and keep looking at what is happening in the landscape of our society, because we see many of these changes coming to pass right before our eyes. So Genesis chapter 22, verse 1.
And it came to pass, after these things, that God tempted Abram, and said to him, Abram, Abraham, and he said, Lo, I am here.
Lo, I'm here. He didn't say it like that, though. So Abraham being put to the test, and there's a little meme that you guys could read in the meantime. But is Abraham truly a faithful servant? A man who would unconditionally be obedient to his Elohim, no matter what the circumstance. Abraham at this point had much substance and lacked nothing except for a son from Sarah, his wife of his youth. Now that his son Isaac is maturing, the Elohim of all creation is making a big ask of him. In quotes, offer up Isaac as a whole burnt offering to me. Whether it tests or not, let's put ourselves in Abraham's shoes, not knowing the eventual outcome, but having our own personalities as a reference. How is this request to be accepted? So how would some of us respond if we were told to do something like this? Would we act, or would we just acquiesce and, whatever? Nobody knows, but it's just for us to think about. This chapter of Genesis, or Bereshit, is referenced as the binding of Isaac when being discussed or taught. It can be considered a seminal moment in the biblical narrative, as it is said to parallel Abraham and his beloved son Isaac with Yahuwah and his beloved son, the Anointed One. As this study group transitioned into this chapter, under the new name TeamD Scripture Study, we are going to address some of the parallels and claims towards a better understanding. Abraham is under a test which can be considered one of the prerequisites for the covenant between him and Yahuwah. Yahuwah wants to validate that his servant, Abraham, is truly faithful before his host and to those who are his enemies. For some, if he disobeyed, it would be a victory for their agenda against Yahuwah Elohim. So it's to some of the Most High enemies' benefit if Abraham was to fail this test, because then they would have cause against the Most High. But Abraham, as we know, would show us how it's done.
We interrupt this broadcast just to let everybody know that there is water in the kitchen on the island. You can help yourself. Okay, back to it.
So we are in verse 2 of 22.
And he said, take thy son, the beloved one, whom you have loved, Isaac, and go into the high land, and offer him there for a whole burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I will tell thee of.
Right, so you see I have a little asterisk next to each one of these, land of Moriah in the Masoretic and, well, highland in the Septuagint. We will touch on this later in the study when it would make sense to talk a little bit more about this. So, only beloved, Ishmael and Isaac, or Isaac and Ishmael.
Is Isaac Abraham's only son, or his beloved, unique, one-of-a-kind son? The Masoretic gives the impression that Ishmael no longer exists or is stripped from memory after he and his mother were exiled from his father's tent. It is as though Abraham has instant amnesia about his son Ishmael, who is apparently excommunicated from his father's memory temporarily. This establishes the basis of conflicts that seemingly pit Jews against Arabs.
And we just read about it in that news clip about who was sacrificed. It's very important why part of this conflict in the Middle East keeps brewing. The Muslims will tell you it was Ishmael who got sacrificed, and, well, the Torah says otherwise. And not only that, it forces you to pick a side. But it's not about picking sides, it's about understanding how this conflict is brewing and to put some context so when you see these things happening, you know how to respond to it.
In the previous study, an alternative view was proposed regarding Ishmael and Isaac being bosom buddies, and his surrogate mother Sarah getting into her feelings. At this moment, Ishmael is off doing his own thing with his mother in support, under the watchful eye of YHWH. A promise is made to Abraham about Ishmael, and YHWH's word does not return to him void. Abraham is asked to do something that seems absurd. He is being asked by YHWH Elohim to off his beloved son Isaac in a distant place. Most importantly, as a whole burnt offering, which is a two-stage process. Slaughter the burning. Ishmael might be saying at this moment to his brother,
better you than me, bruh. Right, so the conflicting context, in part. So continuing on, Ishmael and Isaac, only your beloved.
This situation seems to have some parallels with Job, when the Hasitan presented himself before YHWH with the other Benai Elohim, sons of God, for a divine council meeting.
Okay, so this is to bring some context with Job chapter 1, verse 69, and we're reading from the Septuagint.
And it came to pass on a day that, behold, the angels of Elohim came to stand before YHWH, and the devil came with them. And YHWH said to the devil, whence art thou come? And the devil answered YHWH and said, I am come from compassing the earth and walking up and down in the world. And YHWH said to him, have you diligently considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a man blameless, true, godly, abstaining from everything evil? Then the devil answered and said before YHWH, does Job worship YHWH for nothing?
And we are all attested in this way from time to time. And we should respond appropriately when it does happen. In all things, give thanks. When there is good, when there is not good, give thanks, no matter what.
You give, you take away.
Yep.
Yet, blessed be the name of YHWH.
Yep. So, add for additional confirmation about YHWH having sons, the following excerpt from Psalms. In Psalms 88 in the Septuagint, 89 in the Masoretic, confirms this. And I have both translations here.
For who in the heavens shall be compared to YHWH, and who shall be likened to YHWH among the sons of Elohim?
Right, so that's from the Brenton. For who in the skies can be compared to the Lord? Who among the sons of the mighty can be likened to the Lord? So it's just another way of rendering it, but it's just to show context that the Most High have sons attributed to him. Who knows for certain, but Yashan Jubilees gives the impression that Abraham may be under a test in like manner as Job, with the same circumstances of, in quotes, the adversary trying his righteousness. So this is from Jasher, and it's being read from chapter 23, so it's verse 25, 26, 29, and 30.
And whilst Abraham was proceeding with his son Isaac along the road, Satan came and appeared to Abraham in the figure of a very aged man, humble and of contrite spirit. And he approached Abraham and said to him, are you silly or brutish that you go to do this thing this day to your only son? For Elohim gave you a son in the latter days in your old age, and will you go and slaughter him this day because he committed no violence? And will thou cause the soul of your only son to perish from the earth? And Satan returned and came to Isaac, and he appeared unto Isaac in the figure of a young man, comely and well favored. And he approached Isaac and said to him, Do you not know and understand that your old silly father brings you to the slaughter for this day not?
Right, so
This day for naught.
referencing these passages, when I'm building the scripture study, when I see how something is phrased, it triggers a thought in my head. What, this song's very familiar. So let me see if there's anywhere else within the scriptures that people tend to reference, if there's any context that would sort of validate what I'm thinking based on the narrative. So when I was doing verse 2, it sounded that way, like Abraham was being tested in the same way like Job was being tested. So I just wanted to expand and see if there's any sort of reference that would sort of build on that theory that I had. And this passage here from Yasha is one of them that build on that theory. The next one is from Jubilees. And this is from chapter 17, verse 15 to 16.
And it came to pass in the 7th week, in the 1st year thereof, in the 1st month in this Jubilee, on the 12th of this month, there were voices in heaven regarding Abraham, that he was faithful in all that he told him, and that he loved YHWH, and that in every affliction he was faithful. And the prince Mastema came and said before Elohim, Behold, Abraham loves Isaac his son, and he delights in him above all things else. Bid him offer him as a burnt offering on the altar, and you will see if he will do this command, and you will know if he is faithful in everything wherein you do try him.
And as I spoke in the last Bible study, the scroll of Jubilees closely parallels the Septuagint and the Masoretic in a lot of regards. So here is it giving the name to one of the divine entities that is having that conversation with the Most High about Abraham. And when you get into the Ethiopic religion, they tend to focus on these angelic beings because they have these other extra biblical books that they reference in their religion. So this name would be very familiar to them from that perspective. So Abraham, Isaac, and the Anointed One are not exempt from being tested. And here in Matthew chapter 27, verse 39 to 43, we see the Most High, not the Most High, but the Anointed One being tested at that bitter moment of his life.
And they that passed by reviled him, wagging their heads and saying, You that destroyest the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you be the Son of God, come down from the cross. Likewise also the chief priests, mocking him with the scribes and elders, said, He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he be the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusted in God, let him deliver him now, if he will have him, for he said, I am the Son of God.
And then again, that whole reference about being the Son of God is very important, because sometimes we tend to mix things up as per Bible doctrine, and it's important to see these references when they are mentioned. Son of God means Son of God and nothing else. So, the first parallel, only or beloved. So, in the little meme there, this is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased, and that is from Matthew chapter 3, verse 17.
Isaac is called the beloved son, and there is significance to this characteristic being applied to him. The Anointed One is also called beloved son, which shows that both men have a special place in their respective father's heart. Isaac has paralleled with the Anointed One in terms of the circumstances surrounding their lives. There is countless opinion on the connections between both sons, and a simple search, a Google search of Isaac and Jesus returns many sources, but Dr. Michael Heiser makes an important connection to both individuals. The Greek word monogynous doesn't actually mean only begotten. It presents a problem neither with respect to Jesus having a beginning nor with respect to divine sons of God who are called gods or Elohim in the Old Testament. The confusion extends from a misunderstanding of the root of the Greek word. For many years, monogynist was thought to have derived from two Greek terms, monos, only, and geneo, to beget or bear. Scholars of Greek eventually discovered, though, that the second part of the word, monogynous, does not come from the Greek verb geneo, but rather the noun genos, which means class or kind. I hope everybody's grasping this. When was this again? I can't remember the year. Was this 2014 or 15?
Maybe somewhere around there.
This is very new scholarship that they've been able to verify and find. in ancient texts. The term literally means one of a kind or unique, with no connotation to time, origin, or solitary existence. The validity of this understanding is shown by the New Testament itself. In Hebrews 11:17, Isaac is called Abraham's monogynous. But Isaac was not the only son Abraham fathered, since he fathered Ishmael prior to Isaac. The term must mean that Isaac was Abraham's unique son, the son of the covenant promises and the line through which the Messiah would come. Just as Yahweh is an Elohim and no other Elohim or Yahweh, so Jesus is the unique son, and no other sons of God are like them. So what? He has many sons.
Right, and hence referencing those Psalms so that you would see this is not an alien concept. This is a concept that is just overlooked by whichever religious doctrine people ascribe to, because then they'll have to explain these things, and many of the fellowship leaders don't want to go through that tedious task to explain these things because it would lead to other things that they don't want to discuss.
Dr. Michael Heiser, I'll just put a little plug in here, is an excellent resource for the supernatural worldview of ancient times, and so his PhD and expertise is in all of this, so you can dig even deeper. And I have, and I still am with his scholarship. So, yeah.
Yeah, certain Greek scholars discovered that the word misogynous was derived the noun. What I can't read Greek, so I would not attempt.
Yeah.
So he's just reiterating what was just explained in the previous section about that specific word. So it does not mean only; it just means someone who's beloved or someone who is unique.
Unique for a specific purpose.
Yes. So that's the first parallel between Isaac and the Anointed One.
And we can also use, there's always a very good way to do something, is the law. It's what's called the law of first mention, to get the definition of and the context of what a word truly means. Like, so when we get to the New Testament, you see where it was first used, the context of how it was used. And that's why we have this Septuagint is a great resource with that against the Dead Sea Scrolls.
And since we have seen there's many instances that the New Testament agrees with the Septuagint, it would be very advantageous to always reference those Greek works from the Septuagint, seeing that that's where most of the Greek terminology comes from for the New Testament. So with YHWH Elohim having other sons connected to him, it puts the Anointed One in a special category like Isaac to be called beloved. This love is not taking away the love that Abraham would have for Ishmael and YHWH having for his creation and us individually. So it's not to say it's favoritism, it's just part of, the whole process. Yes. Yeah. So let's keep that in mind. So continuing, the whole burnt offering, second parallel. The typical view is that both Isaac and the Anointed One were to be offered as a sacrifice on the behest of YHWH Elohim. Human sacrifice is frowned upon by YHWH Elohim, and this caption here is just showing the 5 animals that is typically sanctioned for sacrifice. The cow, and we spoke about that, the heifer, we spoke about that with the burning of the alleged red heifer. Then there is the lamb or ram, the goat, and then there is the turtle dove and the pigeon. So those are the 5 animals that is sanctioned for sacrifice on the altar. So this is the prohibition of human sacrifice as it is detailed in Deuteronomy 12:29-31.
And if YHWH, your Elohim, shall utterly destroy the nations to whom you go in thither to inherit their land from before you, and you shall inherit it and dwell in their land. Take heed to yourself that you seek not to follow them after they are destroyed before you, saying, how do these nations act towards their gods? I will do likewise. You shall not do so to your God, your Elohim, for they have sacrificed to their gods the abomination of YHWH, which he hates, for they burn their sons and their daughters in fire to their gods.
And keep in mind, he's not referencing the gods as something inanimate. It's something that is literal. These entities do exist, and they are creating havoc. And Israel took this warning very seriously, as we all know, because they did exactly what he said not to do. So this is from Psalm 105 in the Septuagint, 106 in the Masoretic.
And they served their graven images, and it became an offense to them. And they sacrificed their sons and their daughters to devils, and shed innocent blood, the blood of their sons and daughters, whom they sacrificed to the idols of Canaan. And the land was defiled with blood, and was polluted with their works, and they went a-whoring with their own devices. So YHWH was very angry with his people, and he abhorred his inheritance, and he delivered them into the hands of their enemies, and they that hated them ruled over them.
So we know Israel took it seriously and actually disobeyed the Most High, and it is a consequence still to this day. So when the Most High said don't do something, take it seriously means don't do it. And this is one of the abominations that he despises, and unfortunately, it still happens. So don't think human sacrifice is not happening, it's still happening. They were not suitable as a sacrifice upon a holy altar. An exchange of equal value is what to be considered. One life was spared for the sake of a promise and test. The premise of the sacrifice is that the innocent pays for the guilty. From that perspective was the offer made. So when you go to the altar with your sacrifice, you being the guilty party is not facing the ultimate penalty, which is death. The animal faces that penalty on your behalf. And hopefully once you see the whole process of the sacrifice, it will make you guilty so that you don't repeat that process. Okay, the Anointed One, innocent in every matter, gave his life in exchange to keep the established promise, as the remorseful guilty remain for the future redemption. So those who have to pay the penalty have that opportunity of redemption. That's what I'm trying to get at here. In order for the exchange to be acceptable, the criteria for the sacrifices are used for the offering. So there are specific criteria for sacrifice. One, no younger than 8 days old, and no older than 3 years old. And as we know, with Hebrew boys, from the time they turn 8 years old, they must be circumcised. So this is somewhat of a parallel here with the age of the animal. That animal have to be without spot and blemish, and also we know that the Anointed One was circumcised on the 8th day. When we go back to the narrative, with his mother taking him to the temple, you see that whole process taking place. And then, being poor, they offered the poor man's sacrifice, which was the turtle dove, for his for the 8-day requirement of the Torah. So without spot or blemish, so you have to give something that is perfect, and we know the Anointed One was not about doing foolish things like everybody else. And it has to be the firstborn of the cattle. We know that the Anointed One was the firstborn for his mother, and with Isaac he was the firstborn of the promise, and the firstborn for his mother as well. That's another parallel there. The criteria for selection is used to identify the character of the Anointed One and what that generation needed to look for. So those who were astute with the scriptures would have been looking for these signature signs that would enable them to identify that, okay, that's the one that we're looking for, that is promised for our redemption in the future. So continuing with the burnt offering, what is a whole burnt offering? And it's pronounced mula, the whole burnt offering. And this is an animal offering where the entire sacrifice is completely consumed by fire. Nothing is left at the end of the whole process. The offering had nothing left compared to the other offerings where a portion of the animal was consumed by the priest. So for some of the sacrifices, the priest got a portion and the rest was consumed on fire. This offering was not for sin. Isaac did not have a choice in the matter as the command was given to his father. Neither did the animal, except for the selection criteria. But the Anointed One, he offered his whole life willingly, as nothing was spared in making this bitter decision, an undeserved offer on behalf of the nation of Israel. The offering was for a specific purpose. So this excerpt here is giving some insight into, what the whole burnt offering was all about.
What is a burnt offering? The Hebrew word for burnt offering actually means to ascend, literally to go up in smoke. The smoke from the sacrifice ascended to Elohim, a soothing aroma to YHWH. Leviticus 1:9. Technically, any offering burned over an altar was a burnt offering. But in more specific terms, a burnt offering was a complete destruction of the animal except for the hide, in an effort to renew the relationship between the holy God and sinful man. With the development of the law, God gave the Israelites specific instructions as to the types of burnt offerings and what they symbolized. What is a burnt offering? A person could give a burnt offering at any time. It was a sacrifice of general atonement, an acknowledgement of the sin nature, and a request for renewed relationship with God. God also set times for the priests to give a burnt offering for the benefit of the Israelites as a whole, although the animals required for each sacrifice varied. The ultimate fulfillment of the burnt offering is in Jesus' sacrifice on the cross. His physical life was completely consumed. He ascended to God, and his covering, that is, his garment, was distributed to those who officiated over his sacrifice, Matthew 27:35.
And that is from God Questions. I just liked how they presented it. You don't have to agree with everything that they say, but it's just to give you that idea of what the whole burnt offering was all about and how it's connected to the Anointed One.
The Anointed offered his life wholly and unconditionally, voluntary. He did not hold back, and thus fulfilling his role for the redemption of Israel.
Right, so we are now in verse 3 and 4.
And Abram rose up in the morning and saddled his ass, and he took with him 2 servants and Isaac his son, and having split wood for a whole burnt offering, he arose and departed and came to the place of which God spoke to him on the 3rd day. And Abram, having lifted up his eyes, saw the place afar off.
So I highlighted the 3rd day, and that's supposed to already trigger a thought in your minds. You know, that phrase there. So this section is called the arrival. What is going through Abraham's mind? I'm doing all this prep work before heading out with his son and 2 servants. Is he thinking that sacrificing his son Isaac is part of the deal? Or his faith is solid and was aware of the end result of a more suitable sacrifice would be provided? At this moment he has 2 sons, and if one is dead, then the other would fill the gap. Simple thinking for some of us. No biggie. Remember also that Abraham came from a people who would have participated in quotes, child mass pagan rites. There is some academic dispute on this matter, and this opinion dates back to 1969, which is being referenced here. So this is from the 1st of the 10th, 1969, from Brigham Young University, Human Sacrifice and the Book of Abraham by William James Abrams Jr.
Some time ago, the author had occasion to show facsimile 1 from the Book of Abraham to some of his fellow students in Assyriology. When these students learned that it pictured Abraham about to be offered as a human sacrifice in Babylon, they immediately responded by claiming that there was no evidence that the Babylonians ever practiced human sacrifice. With their negative response and the renewed interest aroused by the recent recovery of the papyrus from which Joseph Smith took facsimile 1, the author felt constrained to dig into the matter. The following is the result of his probings. Did the ancient Babylonians practice human sacrifice? The world of scholarship is confused on the issue. Such scholars as Blom 1, Ward 2, and DeVos 3 flatly deny that human sacrifice was practiced in the Babylon of Abraham's time, though DeVos concedes that the practice came into use in the 7th century BC under the influence of the worship of Molech in Canaan. Other scholars, Jastrow 4, Jeremiah 5, Messner 6, look at the evidence but remain uncommitted. On the other hand, it's quite uncertain whether human sacrifice was known in Mesopotamia. The words of Messner and reflect the attitude of the other uncommitted scholars.
At this point, it seems appropriate to define the term in quotes human sacrifice. We will consider an act as a human sacrifice if 1. A person is killed either on an altar or in a temple or on other holy place, and 2. The killing is being done by a priest, priestess, or god. Both of these conditions should prevail. With the definition of human sacrifice in mind, let us now look at the evidence. The evidence connecting the practice of human sacrifice among these Semites of Babylonia comes from 4 sources. 1, the circumstantial evidence from the archaeological digs. 2, comments in ancient written texts. 3, human sacrifice as pictured on cylinder seals. and 4. The behavior of other Semitic peoples regarding the practice of human sacrifice. To date, only one archaeological dig has produced any circumstantial evidence. Excavations at the Anu Adad Temple of Assur recovered a stele which describes the activities of Samsi Adad the fourth, from BC 823 to BC 811. Now again, this is referencing text that I don't have access to. It was research done by scholars back in 1969, and this is published work that was critically reviewed. So this is information that you can maybe go to a private archive, and if they give you access, you can get more insight into it. But
this isn't there any previous information on this, like older than 1969?
I'm sure there is, but this is the only one I could have dig up just to validate about sacrificing being something connected to Abraham's past. And here they have a papyrus that was found that says Abraham was going to be sacrificed. So by extension, I'm deducing that it is well known to Abraham, maybe in his thoughts, it was something that he needed to do. So that's the whole purpose of this passage.
You would have been familiar.
Yes, you would have been familiar.
This excerpt is to highlight the view that child sacrifice is not foreign and would have been prevalent among the peoples of the time. But the intent of Abraham's heart on the matter is only known by YHWH Elohim, as well validating his obedience. A somewhat misunderstood situation about sacrificing persons is connected to a judge of Israel.
And this is from Judges 11:30 to 31.
And Jephthah vowed a vow to YHWH and said, if you will indeed deliver the children of Ammon into my hand, then it shall come to pass that whosoever shall first come out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the children of Ammon, he shall be YHWH's, and I will offer him up for a whole burnt offering. Now,
those who are aware of this commentary on this, it's also in part about making foolish vows. This was a foolish vow. You don't know what's going to first come out of your house in any given circumstance. But 2, when you really look at this vow that was made, he made a specific claim. He and him. So he was referring to a male whatever coming out of his house. But the main moral of the situation is to be cautious of your vows to Yahuwah. No sacrifice happened here. If you read the whole context of the story, his daughter is who ran out. She did not fit the criteria based on the words that he uttered. But it's just to show, be cautious of your words. And again, the whole burnt offering theme is in connection here. So we are in verse 5 and 6.
And Abraham said to his servants, sit you here with the ass, and I and the lad will proceed thus far, and having worshipped, we will return to you. And Abraham took the wood of the whole burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son, and he took into his hands both the fire and the knife, and the two went together.
Okay, so another passage, another statement here to revisit, another verse. So later in the study, this would be revisited. So the arrival, the 3rd day of the journey, the 3rd parallel. They arrived at the location on the 3rd day of their journey. Another parallel between Isaac and the Anointed One is the 3-day journey to the location and the time period in the grave. So that's the connection there. So this is from Matthew chapter 12, verse 38 to 42.
And certain of the scribes and of the Pharisees answered, saying, Master, we would see a sign from you. But he answered and said unto them, An evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and there shall no sign be given to it, but the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh shall rise in judgment with this generation, and shall condemn it, because they repented at the preaching of Jonas. And behold, a greater than Jonah is here. The queen of the south shall rise up in the judgment with this generation, and shall condemn it, for she came from the uttermost parts of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. Behold, a greater than Solomon is here.
So that's another connection, which I labeled the 3rd parallel. The location is believed to be Mount Moriah, where Jerusalem is situated. As Abraham was led to bring his son to be offered, Mount Zion and Jerusalem tend to be confused as one and the same. This is not the case, as they are 2 different locations in the same region, each having a significant role in ancient Israel and as well as in end-time fulfillment. So this is from Micah chapter 4, verse 6 to 8.
In that day, says Yahweh, I will gather her that is bruised, and will receive her that is cast out, and those whom I rejected. And I will make her that was bruised a remnant, and her that was rejected a mighty nation. And Yahweh shall reign over them in Mount Zion from henceforth, even forever. And you, dark tower of the flock, daughter of Zion, on you the dominion shall come and enter in, even the first kingdom from Babylon to the daughter of Jerusalem.
So here is just a distinction between Zion and Jerusalem being used in the same passage. Sometimes we confuse it and interchange it to mean one and the same, but in actuality, as you can see in that caption here, Mount Zion is separate from Mount Moriah, and it's separate from the Mount of Olives as well. But they are all in the same region. So this is from Zechariah 9:9.
Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Proclaim it aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, the king is coming to you, just and a Savior. He is meek and riding on an ass and a young foal.
And since this is a family Bible study, the word ass is biblically defined, so don't worry about it. We are not using any type of immoral language. So this is from Matthew chapter 21, verse 4 and 5.
All this was done that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet, saying, Tell you, the daughter of Zion, behold, your king comes unto you, meek, and sitting upon an ass, and a colt, the foal of an ass.
So there it's playing out right in front of their eyes. And again, they did not take these cues because they were blinded, maybe intentionally by the Most High. So continuing on, the arrival, not to be excluded is Mount Olives, which brings up the trifecta of trees, and that's an inside joke. It should be 3 in this section. And since we are dealing with the third parallel.
It's a Caribbean joke.
Right, so referencing back to verse 2, that's the first reference we're going to deal with here. The Masoretic English states land of Moriah, and that is Eretz HaMoriah. Other translation of that, whereas the LXX states highland, with no specific mention of a definite location, as well as other translations of that verse, also making the claim about Moriah. So not being pedantic, the Hebrew says land of, which gives a general vicinity or region and not a pinpoint location. So that's the key of the situation here. When it says land of Moriah, it's not saying on Mount Moriah. It's just saying it's the land of Moriah. It's the region it's describing. So there's a reason for making this connection to Mount Moriah. And this is from Jerusalem Archaeological Sites, Mount Moriah, and the source is from the Jerusalem Mosaic, and it is copyright 1995, Hebrew University of Jerusalem. So you can go argue with these guys, not Daniel. Yeah.
Mount Moriah is the name of the elongated north-south stretch of land lying between Kidron Valley and Haggai Valley, between Mount Zion to the west and the Mount of Olives to the east. The Jebusite Zion was situated on the southern slope of Mount Moriah, above the Gihon Spring. After King David captured the city, he made it his capital and named it for himself the City of David. The northern area of the mountain summit lay desolate for long after Zion's capture by David. It was in fact still the private property of Araunah, the city's former Jebusite king. For various reasons, David did not confiscate the site, but preferred to buy it from Araunah for full value. So David passed Ornan for the site's 600 shekels worth of gold. And David built there an altar to Yahweh and sacrificed burnt offerings and offerings of well-being. And that's referenced in 1 Chronicles 21 and 25, and a slightly different version in 2 Samuel 24, 18 to 25. In the course of time, the mountain had acquired an aura of sanctity, and he's subject of many traditions. Indeed, its sacred status may date back to the early Canaanite period, when it perhaps was the cultic center of El Elyon, god of Melchizedek, king of Salem, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High, El Elyon. He blessed him, saying, Blessed be Abraham of God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. Genesis 14:18. The best-known tradition related to Mount Moriah is the binding of Isaac for sacrifice by his father Abraham, related in Genesis 22. So that's quoted from there.
Right, so the key word here is tradition. It's a tradition that they have, and unfortunately traditions become fact over time, and fact becomes dogma and doctrine, and then we have arguments. Moving on. So continuing on, the meaning of Moriah is chosen by Yahuwah, with Jerusalem situated on Mount Moriah and the significance of the holy city. It is fair to match that location with the place of offering for both Isaac and the Anointed One. So this is where tradition collides with each other. So this is from 2 Chronicles 3, verse 1.
And Solomon began to build the house of Yahweh in Jerusalem in the mount of Amoriah, where Yahweh appeared to his father David in the place which David had prepared in the threshing floor of Ornah the Jebusite. But what about another location being a candidate for this event with Abraham and his beloved son Isaac? What about Mount Zion, given that that location is his place of habitation?
So I am offering another theory here. Again, I'm reading, I'm seeing stuff. I said, okay, since all three are in the same location, why can't it not be Mount Zion instead of Mount Moriah, in the land of Moriah? So this is Psalm 131 in the Septuagint.
Sorry, question. To clarify, you're saying the land of Moriah includes Mount Zion
Yes,
in it?
Yep, it includes
Okay.
Mount Zion in it.
Okay. What about Mount Zion, given that that location is his place of habitation? Psalm 131. For the Lord has selected Zion. He has chosen her for a habitation for himself, saying, This is my rest forever. Here will I dwell, for I have chosen it.
So again, the Psalms is saying something. I'm very much familiar with what the Psalm says, so I'm saying, okay, why not explore this as a alternative view of where this where this event with Abraham and Isaac could have taken place.
Jeremiah 14:19. Have you utterly rejected Judah, and have your soul departed from Zion? Wherefore you have smitten us, and there is no healing for us? We waited for peace, but there was no prosperity, for a time of healing, and behold, trouble.
So again, Mount Zion being featured prominently as the place of the Most High habitation.
Mount Zion is featured as the place of Yahweh's habitation in the references made across scriptures. This location would be best suited for Yahweh and his host to observe the events unfolding Abraham and Isaac. With English being a whimsical language, it is easy to equate land of and in to be one and the same. Hence the need to understand the usage of English prepositions when reading to make an informed assessment. Additional justification for connecting Mount Zion as the place would be given as the study advances.
So, wait upon a young man's shoulder, the fourth parallel. With the servants left at the staging place, Abraham and Isaac continued on the final leg of the journey. How old would have Isaac been at this very moment of his life? So there we have a little boy carrying that burden on his shoulder. First person human sacrifice to an Amorite god, as published September to October 2014 issue of Biblical Archaeology. So what I'm using this for is to show, the whole concept of that sacrifice taking place.
Indeed, the most famous biblical episode of almost human sacrifice involves a son who walks 3 days up a mountain with his father and converses with him. On the last leg of the journey, the son carries the wood. He is referred to as a lad or a youth, a na'ar. This, of course, is the famous Akedah in Hebrew, the binding of Isaac in Jewish tradition, often referred to otherwise, somewhat inaccurately, as the sacrifice of Isaac in Genesis 22. Clearly, Isaac is no infant.
No, he's not. He's a little mature, and Isaac had to be an age to carry the load. No little child would carry a load on their shoulder. They'd have to have a heartfelt discussion with his father, which shows maturity along the way. So him and his father would have been having some discussions along that path. And he would be listening to his voice, the voice of his father, following the instructions being given to him. So just a couple, details to show that Isaac is not a lad, but a mature young man in this situation. So we are in verse 7 to 10.
And Isaac said to Abraham his father, Father, and he said, What is it, son? And he said, Behold, the fire and the wood. Where is the sheep for a whole burnt offering? And Abraham said, Elohim will provide himself a sheep for a whole burnt offering, my son. And both having gone together came to the place which Elohim spoke of to him. And there Abraham built the altar and laid the wood on it, and having bound the feet of Isaac his son together, he laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand to take the knife to slay his son.
And here we can see Isaac know what a whole burnt offering is. It's not alien to him, so he's very much aware of what was required. So the fifth parallel, the binding. Isaac is bound whether feet only or his entire body, he did not resist his father. One should ask, why did Isaac not run away or object? Alluding further to Isaac's age, he asks his father a fundamental question. Behold the fire and the wood. Where is the sheep for the whole burnt offering? Isaac is observant and is aware of what a sacrifice is, as he would have observed his father performing the task at home, and being taught of the significance of the offering. Abraham makes the finishing touches by building the altar, placing the bundle of wood upon it, and laying his born son upon the pile. Abraham was performing the act knowingly, leading his son to the final act. Unknowingly, the Anointed One accusers led him in their hatred and envy, and was first foretold by the prophet King David. So there we have a little meme that you can read in the meantime. So this is from Psalm 21 in the Septuagint, 16 to 19.
For many dogs have compassed me, the assembly of the wicked doers have beset me round. They pierced my hands and my feet, they counted all my bones, and they observed and looked upon me. They parted my garments among themselves and cast lots upon my raiment. But thou, O YHWH, remove not my help afar off, be ready for mine aid.
And King David's prophetic utterance unfolded a little more than 20 generations later, and this is in Matthew 27, 34 to 36.
And they gave him vinegar to drink, mingled with gall, and when he had tasted thereof, he would not drink. And they crucified him, and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet. They parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots. And sitting down they watched him there.
The Anointed One is led to his final moment in an undignified way. Isaac is bound by his loving father for the final act. Yahuwah, though he could have, did not intervene to rescue his beloved son from the ordeal, but had to endure it in order to redeem Israel and eventually the world. So this is from Matthew 15, verse 21 to 25.
Then Yeshua went thence and departed into the coasts of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the same coast, and cried unto him, saying, Have mercy on me, O YHWH, you son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with the devil. But he answered her not a word, and his disciples came and besought him, saying, Send her away, for she cries after us. But he answered and said, I am not sent, but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Then came she and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me.
And this is very loaded. There's more to this, but it's just to show the role that he came to fulfill as per the prophecies. So continuing on, the Anointed One is led to his final moment in an undignified way. Oh shucks, I'm sorry. So this is from John chapter 3, 14 to 16.
And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. For Elohim so loved the world that he gave his only monogenes, one of a kind, unique, for a purpose, Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. I kind of pulled an amplified version thing right there.
Yep, fully amplified. And this is from Psalm 23, verse 1 to 4, Septuagint.
A psalm for David on the first day of the week. The earth is YHWH's, and the fullness thereof, the world and all that dwell in it. He has founded it upon the seas and prepared it upon the rivers. Who shall go up to the mountain of YHWH, and who shall stand in his holy place? He that is innocent in his hands and pure in his heart, who has not lifted up his soul to vanity nor sworn deceitfully to his neighbor.
So what I'm getting at here is that, the word world used in John 3:16 is cosmos, meaning everything that is encompassed in what we know as the physical universe. And it's the same word that is used here in this passage. The world is Yahuwah's. So, for God so loved the world should have a different context in your head in order to really understand what is being narrated in that passage of Scripture. There is a clear distinction between the earth, world, and people, hence understanding what the death of the Anointed One is all about. In order to receive salvation, there is a requirement of obedience, as like Abraham, Isaac, and the Anointed One carrying out their instructions given, even unto death. So, salvation requires obedience. It's not just a simple, accept Jesus into my heart and we move on. There's more to it than that. And people need to understand this, I don't want to beat that for too long. So moving on, we are in Genesis chapter 12, 22, 11 to 13.
And the angel of Yahweh called him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Behold, I'm here. And he said, Lay not your hand upon the child, neither do anything to him, for now I know that you fear Elohim, and for my sake you have not spared your beloved son. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and beheld, and lo, a ram caught by his horns in the plant of Sebek. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a whole burnt offering in the place of Isaac his son.
So intervention, an angel of Yahuwah, the sixth parallel. An angel messenger out of heaven called out to Abraham. It is interesting that an angel or messenger is taking the lead role in testing Abraham with his beloved son Isaac. Right. The angel messenger is the angel going as far as saying, For now I know that thou fearest God, and for my sake thou hast not spared thy beloved son. Hence stating earlier that Abraham may be tested in the same manner like Job. In this instance, it is not with the Hasatan putting down the challenge, but an angel or messenger that is doing it this time around. A close look at the statement, both from the Masoretic and the Septuagint, the angel is the one that is testing Abraham, which would mean that this individual had some authority in the matter. Could this be the same angel that met with Abraham before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah? And we discussed that back in chapter 18 party of the study. As discussed in that study, there would have been either 3 or 4 parties meeting with Abraham on that heated day. A suitable whole burnt offering was provided, a male ram, which is representative of both Isaac and the Anointed One. The ram is caught in a thicket, or sebek, and it's the same pronunciation here, plant as specified in the English rendering of the Septuagint. There is much insight to this plant as discussed in the following excerpt.
History of Sebek interpretation. The intertextual linking of sabachthani with sabeking is not a recent innovation by YHWH. The suggestion that sabachthani is an allusion to the plant of Sebek in the Septuagint was recognized by Leo A. Castro and appears as early as 1650 in Victorinus Bythner's Psalm commentary. And although it is a peripheral interpretation, it's been revived in Novum Testamentum as recently as 2014. Associatum of the cross was the plant of Sebek, has an ancient pedigree. Melito of Sardis mentions it in fragment 11. Wilkin notes Melito uses the term Sebek, which is the Greek transliteration of the Hebrew
Sebek, same word,
for bush or thicket. His version of the text follows the Septuagint. The significance he gives to Sebek is not, however, clear from the text. It could be that he takes the bush to refer to the cross, because a ram hanging on a branch could signify someone hanging on a cross. In the Neophatic Targum, the participle
MSBK, entangled,
occurs in the margin and could have suggested the reference to the cross. 2 scholia on Genesis 22:13 are reproduced in the 1581 edition of the Septuagint published by Card Caraf that note the following. The Syriac and the Hebrew text use the word suspended as more clearly typifying the cross. The word sebek some have rendered remission, others upright, as if the meaning agreeing with the popular belief were a goat walking erect up to a bush and there standing erect caught by his horns, so as to be a plain type of the cross. For this reason it's not translated, because the single Hebrew word signifies in other language many things. To those, however, who ask the meaning, it is proper to give an answer and to say that sebek denotes lifted up.
And for those who take care of goats, you know that they do walk on their 2 feet and do get entangled, and they do some strange stuff, but that's just a side note. A timely intervention to preserve the life of Isaac and thus his seed through which King David and the Anointed One would eventually be sired. The ram being caught in the thicket is typically linked to the crown of thorns placed on the Anointed One's head. Matthew 27:29.
And after braiding a crown of thorns, they placed it on his head and put a staff in his right hand. And falling on their knees before him, they mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews.
Continuing on, an angel of Yahuwah, 6th parallel, continuing along the line of Abraham being tested in like manner as Job, Jasher and Jubilee has a few more things to add to this matter. So this is from Jasher.
And Abraham bound his son Isaac and placed him on the altar upon the wood, and Isaac stretched forth his neck upon the altar before his father. And Abraham stretched forth his hand to take the knife to slay his son as a burnt offering before YHWH. At that time the angels of mercy came before YHWH and spoke to him concerning Isaac, saying, YHWH, you are merciful and compassionate king over all that you have created in heaven and in earth, and you support them all. Give me therefore ransom and redemption instead of your servant Isaac, and pity and have compassion upon Abraham and Isaac his son, who are this day performing your commands. Have you seen, O YHWH, how Isaac the son of Abraham your servant is bound down to the slaughter like an animal? Now therefore let your pity be roused for them, O YHWH. And at that time YHWH appeared unto Abraham and called to him from heaven and said to him, Lay not your hand upon the lad, neither do you anything unto him, for now I know that you fear Elohim in performing this act, and I am not withholding your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, a ram was caught in a thicket by his horns. That was the ram which YHWH Elohim had created in the earth in the day that he made earth and heaven. For YHWH had prepared this ram from that day to be a burnt offering instead of Isaac.
And this is from Jubilees 18, 9-13.
And I stood before him, and behold, the prince Mastema, and YHWH said, Bid him not to lay his hand on the lad, nor to do anything to him, for I have shown that he fears YHWH. And I called to him from heaven, and said unto him, Abraham, Abraham. And he was terrified, and said, Behold, here am I. And I said unto him, Lay not your hand upon the lad, neither do anything to him, for now I have shown that you fear YHWH, and you have not withheld your son, the firstborn son, from me. And the prince Mastema was put to shame. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a ram caught by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it for a burnt offering in the stead of his son.
So verse 14.
And Abraham called the name of that place, YHWH has seen, that they might today in the mount, they might say today in the mount, YHWH has seen.
Abraham, after making do with the provision of the whole burnt offering, calls the place YHWH, the existing one who sees. Okay. Does the song come to mind?
Jehovah Jireh, my provider, His grace is sufficient for me, for me, for me. Okay, we'll stop.
Does the song I do not want to believe we are experiencing an episode of The Twilight Zone or the Mandela Effect, but this passage has always been connected with the provision as in the meme captioned right there. Looking at the number of translations, including the KJV, they agree with the Masoretic and the Septuagint. But there are a few exceptions to this agreement, so I'm sure everybody always have in mind that this passage is talking about YHWH, Jireh, our provider. But when I read this, I say, what on earth is going on here? I never expected that. I've read this many times, but again, I'm taking my time going through the scriptures and I'm seeing it word for word. So this is from the English Standard Version, and as you can see, it says the Lord would provide. So this is one that does not agree with the Septuagint or the Masoretic. Then we have the American Standard Version, again, same thing, same provide as the meme. Then we have here the Good News Bible, the GNB, again it says provide. And then we have the Darby, and it says also that provide. And then a couple others I referenced, the NIV, the Bethel Edition, the Jerusalem Bible, also say provides, and I have copies of these biblical texts. And I open it just to verify, black and white, that's what it says. But looking at some other texts, just to bring some context, I look at the KJV 1611. It agrees with the Masoretics and the Septuagint. It says seen. Okay. I also looked at the Geneva Bible, and it also agrees with the Masoretic and as well as the Septuagint. So here we have a passage of scripture that says one thing, and we see another thing. Only the Most High knows what it truly is. But sticking with the narrative, commentary on this passage seemed to ignore both the Masoretic and the Septuagint narrative, with the King James and the Geneva Bible agreeing with those two texts. And anybody who have their Bibles here, what each respective Bible say? Right, so complete Jewish but study Bible. So it's Genesis 22:14.
Daniel, can you put the light on beside you there? Just turn the thing down.
Okay. Abraham called the place Adonai Yahweh. The Lord will see to it.
So that's
As it is said to this day on the mount that Adonai has seen.
right. So we have the complete Jewish Bible saying "seeing"
At the end?
at the end. What version do you have, Nichelle? Okay.
Abraham called the name of that place Yehoyarah, and it's supposed to stay on the mountain.
Okay, so we have the scripture version saying that provides, and we have a complete Jewish Bible saying seen. Charles, what do you have? He has the same as you. It has 1,000